Welcome to the podium, Michael Carney, President of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. That isn't actually, it's a long walk. It doesn't look that, but like the whole way I'm like, wow, it's like, I'm a little self-conscious. It is so great to be here, and what a wonderful venue to have such an important conversation. Before I get into my remarks, I just want to say thank you to Walmart. Great hosts, great partners, and an amazing venue. I wish I had this in Washington. We have a great building, but this is really cool. So there's an empty seat in this room, and it belongs to an emergency manager who's deployed right now. One of 16 cities hosting the World Cup. 5 million people in the stands, billions watching, their entire team stretched across an operation that has never been attempted at this scale on American soil. And back home, their community is 3 weeks into hurricane season. That's not a hypothetical, that's Wednesday. We know how this goes. We've lived it enough times to know the script by heart. The disaster hits, the calls go out, people who have never met try to coordinate in real time, all pulling in roughly the same direction with no shared map, no pre-built relationships, no common operating picture. And then when it's over, we write a report. After Katrina, the report was unsparing. Not a failure of courage, not a failure of resources, a failure of coordination. After Lahaina, the deadliest American wildfire in more than a century, the after-action reports found no formal mutual aid agreements between fire departments. Private sector partners had aircraft and tankers ready to go. Nobody had built the model to use them. The National Emergency Management Association said it in March, in the careful language of people who don't want to embarrass anyone. The private sector and emergency managers aren't working together as well as they should be. I'll say it plainly. We are leaving capability on the table while people die. We are very good at writing reports. We are not yet good enough at changing what they find. That ends today. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation harnesses the power of business for the good of America and the world. Disasters are one of the places where that mission is most urgent and most tested. Business shows up after every major disaster in this country. You just saw it on the screens. The question is whether it shows up organized. In this room right now, you have emergency managers, business leaders, nonprofit executives, faith communities, volunteer organizations, and philanthropists. Every actor that shows up after a disaster in this room before one. What we haven't had is a shared operating model, pre-built, trusted, practiced, ready before the storm makes landfall. That is what we're building today, a roadmap to 2030 with your names on it. But I want to ask you something before we begin. Are we building it for the right future? Because the disasters coming aren't the ones we've already planned for. What if it's not one crisis? What if it's 3 simultaneously? A hurricane season running hot while wildfires burn across the Pacific Northwest, and a cyber intrusion quietly makes your logistic network unreliable. No single moment of failure, just cascading consequences faster than any plan designed for one thing at a time can absorb. Or the Cascadia subduction zone, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake off the Pacific coast. Tsunami, bridges down, the I-5 corridor severed. 1 million people displaced, degraded communications and supply chains that were never designed for that kind of rupture. An adversary doesn't need to detonate a weapon to bring a system down. They just need to find the gaps we've already documented and exploit them. We actually just did a war game, I think Preston is here from Hillwood in Dallas, where we looked at the economic implications of a GPS disruption during the World Cup. And it very, very quickly spiraled out of control. But the takeaway from that war game was the same as the takeaway from every war game we organize, and we do a lot of them. Communication, creativity, and communication. That's the solution to all of these threats. The vulnerabilities in our coordination model, they're not just inefficiencies, they're attack surfaces. So here are the 3 assumptions that should shape everything you do today. The first, disasters will be more compound and cascading, not one crisis, convergence. The plans we've built for a single event will not hold. Your solutions today need to be designed for the pile-on, for the moment when the hurricane and the wildfire and the cyber disruption arrive together. The second, responsibility will be more distributed. We learned this lesson during COVID. Operation Warp Speed would not have worked if government and industry had not found ways to collaborate. The federal safety net today is thinner than it was 18 months ago. FEMA has lost thousands of people. CISA's workforce has been drastically reduced, and neither agency has Senate-confirmed leadership right now. That's the reality we're designing around. The coordination model we build by 2030 has to be rooted in what's already in the community, already trusted, already present, already capable, before anyone calls for help. The third thing I want to flag for you, trust is an operational requirement, not a nice to have, not a relationship goal, although anyone who's married knows that it's definitely a relationship goal. But when trust breaks down, decisions slow. And when decisions slow, people die. We saw it in Katrina, we saw it in Lahaina. Trust is built before the crisis. That's another one of the lessons we learn from these war games or simulations that we do as part of our Global Threats Initiative. It's the only thing that holds when everything else is breaking. So there are 6 solution sprints today, 6 specific gaps to close: how we coordinate, how we activate capabilities, how we align supply chains, how we share information, and how we deploy technology. 6 sprints, 6 gaps, 1 roadmap. Here's what we need from you today. 1, think big. 2, where's 2? I stopped reading and then I lost my place. Crush barriers, commit to solutions. Not your organization's position. And that's really hard for someone in Washington, because we always want to show up and say what our position is. This is really what do we actually need to do in order to deliver. What actually works. In days, America turns 250, 2.5 centuries of a country that at its best, in its hardest moments, figures out how to work together. Not because it's easy, because it's the only thing that works. So what does the next generation inherit from us? I think they inherit what we build in rooms like this one. The pre-built relationships, the exercise coordination models, the supply chains that are mapped and ready, the communities that don't just survive disasters, but they come back stronger. So I'll leave you with this. Many of you have spent significant portions of your lives in crisis, responding to it, recovering from it, or trying to prevent the next one. That is not a burden, that is a qualification. The after-action reports have been written. The gaps have been named. After 9/11, after Katrina, after Maria, after COVID, after Lahaina. The recommendations have been made more times than any of us can count. What hasn't happened yet is the hard work of actually closing them. That emergency manager who couldn't be here today, the one stretched between a World Cup and hurricane season, they're counting on what this room produces. Their community is counting on it. The community that gets hit next, the one that doesn't know it yet, is counting on it too. That is what today is for. To Julie Gerke and the Walmart Foundation, and to Brooks Nelson and the entire Walmart team, thank you. Your commitment to hosting this summit is exactly the kind of private sector leadership this work requires. There's an empty seat in this room. Let's fill it. Thank you.
Welcome to the stage, Gerard Durman, Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and State and Local Government Relations at Walmart.
Thank you.
Good
Good morning, everyone. I'm a little thrown off. Usually I come out to Cleveland Rocks. I'm from Northeast Ohio. My rider requires that that's a song I walk on stage to. We didn't want to pay the royalty fees since this is going out to a broader audience, so here we are with the house music. Nonetheless, it's great to be here this morning. It's great to see all these tremendous partners in the audience, and it's wonderful to think about the day that we have ahead of ourselves. I'd like to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation for bringing together leaders from all over the country, from different sectors, public, private, business, government, foundations, and other entities. And as Mike mentioned, that's an important piece to why we're here this morning. It's an important piece to the gathering that is taking place today and all the events that will precede this. And I think as we think about the opportunity to make a change and do things on a blue sky day like today is, and hopefully it remains that way, this is really where we can and will make a difference. And I think you'll hear that from some of our guests today and from some of the panels. By way of introduction, again, my name's Gerard Dearman. I lead our public affairs, state and local government relations team. So I have the privilege of working across all 50 states with governors, local elected officials, communities. And my team has the audacious task at times of responding to disasters. And as I was thinking about preparing some of the remarks this morning, I thought about some of the seminal moments in my career where the company stepped up. And most of you, I hope, have all heard of our response to Hurricane Katrina. So I'm going to put a pin in that one for a minute and tell you a story about when I first moved here, or moved back to Bentonville about 15 years ago. It was a spring day, and we were at my son's soccer match. Weather turned really bad, right? We all go home, hunker down. Tornado sirens are going off here locally in Bentonville. We moved from Ohio, so we knew a little bit about tornadoes, but we hadn't really experienced a spring storm in Bentonville yet. And for those not from this area, it's a little bit of a harrowing experience. That storm misses us, but we turn on the TV, and our eyes are opened up to the destruction that happened in Joplin, Missouri. An F5 tornado tears through there. That was 15 years ago. And as I thought about my role and the role of our company in that community, it's a community about an hour north of here, as the crow flies, we think about the response, we think about the partnerships, we think about the communities, we think about the neighbors who are impacted. And Mike Moore, who was our ops leader at the time, made a commitment to rebuild that Walmart for the community the fastest we could ever rebuild a store. Typically, from shovel to grand opening, ribbon cutting, 18 months if we're lucky, if everything goes perfect. We rebuilt that store in under 5 months. And Glenda, who you're going to hear from, was one of the leaders on the operations side. And as you think about the work we do as a team and as a company, we can't do it without the incredible partners that are assembled in this room. Because for every Joplin, there's a Chico, California. There's a wildfire that ravages a whole town. And we have hundreds of people in our Chico Walmart parking lot a couple days before Thanksgiving, camping out, seeking shelter, and that was all they had. And we had calls with Jason Jackson, our EOC, and we talked about what can we do? You can't trespass those people and ask them to leave. So we work with the town, we work with the governor, we work with NGOs up there, and we learn what we need we need more shelter. So we turned a high school into a shelter. We had people from Walmart in the community amassed to go up there and do that work. And it's interesting because each one of the different leaders who have made the call to do that thing and push Walmart in a way that helps us support the community in their time of need is a really great lesson. And it's a lesson that Lee Scott then brought back from Hurricane Katrina. Many of you have seen the pictures. We're very proud of it. It hangs on the wall around our offices of the trucks lined up trying to get into New Orleans to help first responders. Lee Scott came back from that and he said, what could we do as a Walmart if we acted that way every day? And since 2005, the mission of this company and the mission of a lot of people in this room is to do those very things. So that's why it is so incredible to be able to host all of you today and also to introduce our guest speaker, Governor Andy Beshear. Governor Beshear is someone who understands the importance of partnership and collaboration. Walmart had the opportunity to work with Governor Beshear, not only on our COVID response, but through some disasters that also hit Kentucky. We had some floods, tornadoes, and again, Glenda, you were right there in the middle of it, so it's no wonder you're going to be a panelist, so we're going to hear from you. Governor Beshear's leadership is rooted in family, faith, and public service, values shaped by his parents, former Governor Steve Beshear and former First Lady Jane Beshear. At Walmart, as I mentioned, our connection to Governor Beshear and his dad runs pretty deep throughout my almost entire career. In fact, many, many moons ago, Governor Beshear bequeathed me with the honor of being a Kentucky colonel, which at the time, is the highest honor given by a governor or other elected officials in Kentucky. So I wear that with pride, and I have some cards that still say I'm a Kentucky colonel, just in case I'm speeding through Kentucky and need to get out of something. So hopefully that does work. I don't know. That's what his dad told me. It's probably just a wise tale. Nonetheless, Governor Beshear has been an incredible partner. You'll see some photos of him behind us from Dawson Springs, the flooding in Hazard County, when he spent time with Doug McMillon and spent time, more importantly, in the store and in the community. And I think as you think about the challenges that Governor Beshear has faced, he talks a lot about Team Kentucky. And that what it means is neighbors, businesses, nonprofits, and public leaders pulling in the same direction for Kentucky families. He was on the ground, he was comforting families, coordinating resources, and reminding people that they had not been forgotten. So today, this morning, it's an honor for me to welcome not only Kentucky's governor, but a leader who understands the resilience of communities, the power of neighbors helping neighbors, and the role Walmart can play when families need us most. Governor, thank you for your leadership and your partnership.
Thank you. All right, we appreciate y'all. I like the walk-on music. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Gerard, or maybe I should say Colonel, for that introduction. Good luck with the speeding. It is great to be here with you in Arkansas this morning, and I want to thank all the leaders at Walmart and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for bringing us all together on such an important topic. As governor, I have now led our state through 15 federally declared weather disasters, a pandemic, a senseless mass shooting, multiple helicopter crashes, and even a UPS plane crash. So I know firsthand the importance of being prepared. I took office as Kentucky's governor in December of 2019, thinking I knew a whole lot about this job. And a little less than 4 months later, we were hit with the pandemic. There was no playbook for a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. We all remember that time. Information changed daily, and so much was unknown. Our people were scared. We were all doing our best, and the goal for me was to do whatever I could to protect the most lives possible. Those were dark times, but they also taught us a lot. Maybe most important is the power and importance of communication. Beginning with our first case, I held a press conference every day at the same time for a year and a half without missing one single day. Our people got the most up-to-date information directly from me, and they knew we were there for them. Many of those lessons helped guide me through our first weather disaster, an F4 tornado, though if that was an F4, I can't imagine an F5. It stayed on the ground nearly 200 miles. It hit us in December of 2021. It devastated Western Kentucky, wiping out entire communities. In fact, it destroyed 70% of every structure in my dad's hometown of Dawson Springs. It took the lives of 81 Kentuckians, each a child of God taken from us far too soon. In the months and the years after, Kentucky was hit again and again. We had the 22 floods that swept through eastern Kentucky, killing 45 Kentuckians, wiping out full towns on the way. We had ice storms, more floods, more tornadoes. We had ice storms. Like I said, we had ice sandwiches of snow, ice, then snow, then plunging temperatures. Every disaster came with its own pain, loss, and heartbreak. But in Kentucky, we've learned what to do. And we've had, unfortunately, too much practice at the steps that we have to take to save lives. I see disaster response in a couple of distinct phases. The first is preparation, then emergency response. then stabilization, and finally, that rebuilding. The first thing is to be as prepared as we can. Weather is unpredictable, but we've learned that having expert-level weather analysis in-house helps us to be prepared faster. We brought in a National Weather Service meteorologist to work inside of our Kentucky Emergency Management operations, and let me tell you, the National Weather Service is essential, is critical, and we should be concerned about any cuts to the organization that gives our people the heads up about when the worst is coming. Thanks to having that in-house meteorologist, and sadly our people having lived through the worst, we are seeing better preparation and our people being more weather aware than I think ever before. And that's helped us get through some pretty rough storms with a minimal or even no loss of life. Just like during the pandemic, we're able to use those forecasts to relay the facts and advise on best practices to stay safe. Ahead of a storm, we get the word out through traditional news, television, online, and radio. We also post almost every warning on social media and through every available avenue to ensure that families are informed and ready. Remember, I think about this oftentimes in politics right now. People get their news from more sources than ever before in our lives. You just think about the fact that on social media, you've got Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and it goes on and on and on. Our job has to be to communicate through absolutely all of them to make sure that everyone knows what's coming. If a storm system is moving in overnight, it's that much more important to do because we know how deadly natural disasters are when they strike in the evening, and we have been messaging over and over that you have to have a weather radio, that you have to have the ability to be woken up in the middle of the night. So we've created grant programs and others to distribute weather radios, including to the deaf and hard of hearing community. When we know we're facing significant risk, I think one of the most important things a governor can do is preemptively sign a state of emergency. That allows us to activate state resources, to bring more people into Kentucky Emergency Management. It allows us to go ahead and muster the National Guard. And when you become governor, you learn what the term muster means. Right? It means it takes a decent amount of time to get citizens who are willing to become soldiers into their garrison, to get their orders, to gas up the Humvees, to have the helicopters ready. It takes more time than any of us would like. And that's when we know there's going to be a significant risk, how important that state of emergency is. I activate the state's price gouging laws early to make sure that everyone knows that there will be no taking advantage of our people. And then we also pre-position teams now based on the challenges ahead. When you've been through as many floods as we have, you learn the value of the swift water rescue teams. And we have taken our training to another level, going out and training every fire department that's willing, every other emergency responder group that's willing. And now we are able to coordinate them and to put them out in different areas that we believe are going to flood before the rain starts falling. We learned that in Eastern Kentucky in 2022 when one of our most important groups was headed to Letcher County, couldn't get there. 4 counties before, they had to put the boats in the water and start saving as many people as they could. What that meant for Letcher County is we didn't have those resources there for about another day when the waters came down enough to reach them. But by having that state of emergency, by having more teams out there that are trained and being able to pre-position them, we see rescue start right away, and we know we've saved countless number of lives because of it. You just look at what the right response can do. In that 2022 flood alone, we made over 1,300 rescues just from emergency personnel alone. But what I also know is that more than that number of people were saved by their neighbors, refusing to leave until their neighbor was safe, carrying them through the water, forming human chains to grab people and to pull them to safety. We also work with local emergency management departments to establish shelters, again, before the storm hits. We establish them oftentimes at schools or in community centers where we know there'll be power, where we know we have a backup generator, where we know people can come in, be warm, where we know supplies will come to during that period of time, and where especially they can hook up medical devices. We work with local hospitals ahead of time to make sure we have nursing staffs that can stop by and make sure that those devices are being used appropriately. We have a hotline that we activate that is for every call that shouldn't be going to 911. People who might need just a little extra assistance, but it hasn't reached the emergency phase, because we know that a flood of 911 calls, if it is not a dire emergency during one of these storms, could hold us up from getting to the person who needs the help the most. We stay in constant contact with partners at all levels. When that tornado was going over Mayfield, and I know you all remember the pictures of Mayfield, I was talking to the mayor, I was talking to the police chief, and I was talking to the fire chief, and they did not know what they were going to see when they emerged. That's the preparation. The part that I think most of us talk about the most is the emergency response. With all our preparation, we have an idea of what to expect, and that's where all the communication with local agencies helps. So when the worst hits, we can jump into action immediately. I think our most recent disaster, the UPS plane crash in Louisville last year, is a perfect example of the power of coordination. It was 5:14 p.m. on Election Day, that Tuesday. I was sitting down to watch a couple of elections that I'd helped the various candidates in, and somebody came in and said there'd been a plane crash. And when you're governor, the first thing you think of is it's a small plane. I mean, those happen. We had one happen a couple of days ago. And they said, oh no, it's at Muhammad Ali International Airport. It is either a large commercial or a UPS plane. It's hard to say thankfully, but it was a cargo plane. But still, it hit a business nearby. Ultimately, 15 people died because of that crash. Again, each one missed by their family. If it had gone a slightly different direction, it could have hit a Ford plant. If it had gone a different direction than that, it could have hit our fairgrounds, where we had some significant activity that day. On the ground, what we saw is a massive explosion and a fire burning that could have easily gotten out of control and made what was already a terrible tragedy much worse. But what we saw is 18 local fire departments responding with 50 separate trucks. Because of their preparation, they acted as one unit, even though we're talking about 18 different chiefs. That day and through the night, they fought that fire and prevented it from spreading any further, from hurting anyone else, from impacting a larger area. We even had 4 fire departments backfill for them, knowing that we could have emergencies in any one of their areas, and we had that covered. Local police departments, sheriffs, and utility companies were at the scene. Our National Guard, state police, and state agencies were all coordinating with locals to make sure the people living nearby knew what they should do. It was an inspiring example of intense preparation, training, drills, but also information sharing in a dire situation. I was really proud of what we were able to accomplish. And just as an example of working together, the mayor of Louisville, a friend of mine, was out of town that day. I got there as quickly as I could and was on the ground, on site, until he made it back. Now, while we are members of the same party, there's no party in response to a natural disaster. There shouldn't be any friction between state and local and federal. It should just be all of us as coordinated as we can be, ready to jump into action and doing our best. The emergency phase is about empowering our first responders. It's why we've created specific trained search and rescue teams. We've learned the importance of that when we had to go what I wish was door to door in Mayfield and Dawson Springs, but was really pile of rubble to pile of rubble. If you all have lived through these, you know what's painted on a door or a wall of a home when it's been searched and when there are still bodies inside. Having those skilled, trained groups ready to ultimately answer that call is so critically important. I remember being in Mayfield, standing outside the candle factory, if you all remember that. It was hit, and we thought that there were 100+ plus people still inside. And I remember staring at what used to be a 2-story factory that was a 6-foot pile of rubble with the cars that had been on the parking lot on top of it. Watching the dogs, hoping they'd make a sound because the cadaver dogs were coming next. Those search and rescue teams worked and worked and worked, and because of their work and eventually information we got, we learned we only lost 13 people in that factory when it could have been so much worse. During weather events, a big part of the initial response is also the sheltering during the actual storm itself. Where do people go? And then it's what happens in the next 2 to 3 days. So for that night, you find the traditional shelters. You find the gyms. You find the Red Cross and what they can set up. Churches take people in. But for the size of disasters this country is seeing, traditional one-night shelters in a gym just don't work anymore. So we got innovative. In Kentucky, we have 44 state parks. 17 of them are resort parks, and that means they have lodging, cafeterias, and kitchens, and state employees that are already working there. When the tornadoes hit in 2021, an area where we had about 4 different parks, we sent our rangers out immediately after. They picked people up, brought them to that lodge where that family could have a room and a bed and a bathroom. Everybody who worked in the kitchens immediately came in and started taking care of our folks to have a hot meal there ready for them. Our park staff was incredible. We had one member show up for work who'd lost her own home that we only figured out 2 days later needed to be sheltered in that same park. So when future disasters hit, we turn to our parks again, recognizing that they answer the question of not just where am I going to stay tonight, but where I can stay this week or this month. During the Eastern Kentucky floods of 2022, we housed over 300 Kentuckians in our state parks. After those floods, the CEO of the Red Cross called me and said our use of state parks is one of the most creative, but also one of the most helpful steps that they had seen. They believed we were ahead of most of our country in how we take care of our people, and my response is that's just who we are. Our parks or a hotel program or planning ahead for that second, third, or eighth night is so important, and it means people can actually focus on what they're going to do with their lives and not just where they're going to have a roof over their head. The next phase, which I call the stabilization phase, is what a lot of states at different times, I believe, have skipped. But the truth is, no one jumps from being in that shelter for a couple days or the park that month into suddenly having a rebuilt home. We are talking about months, if not years, to get to that point. What is that 6-month stabilization plan for a family that was probably underinsured or not insured at all and has lost literally everything that they have? How are they going to live? Where are their kids going to stay? How are they going to get to school? What are they going to do with their lives? How are they going to pick it all up? So in Kentucky, we started what we call the Commonwealth Sheltering Program. Initially, we brought in over 200 travel trailers after the tornadoes in 2021, and we found sites for them, whether it was at our state parks where people would bring in their RVs, or we built them out in different places. We knew that people needed a medium-term housing option to where they could stay 6 months or even a year as they got their life back up and going, while their home was rebuilt, while they looked for a permanent place to stay. And sometimes we think that maybe relatives can take people in, but remember, a lot of people that works for a week or for a month. And so what we found in our sheltering program was that we didn't just have the initial demand, but we would see that demand grow as people's now really complicated lives evolved. These options gave our people a place to call home, and I just remember handing people the keys, and you would just see a weight lifted off of them. Some of the trauma just coming off of them, knowing that where they were going to be tomorrow, what couch their kids might be sleeping on, was not something that they had to worry about. In the aftermath of the flooding, we used some of the same travel trailers, but needed more. We signed an agreement with former Governor of Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, and I want to give John Bel a huge amount of credit for this. I mean, he called me and he said, what you all have been through is rough, and we've been through it too. and I've got several hundred travel trailers, and I'll surplus them to you today. He said, all you got to do is hire the people to come down and pick them up. And I thank God for my friendship with that man, because within a week after the flooding, we were rolling those travel trailers in, and people were seeing that there was going to be a tomorrow. In the end, he donated, and the people of Louisiana donated over 300 trailers for our people. I will tell you, I've tried to do it when disasters have hit since, and we stand ready to do it with the ones that we have left. But we don't necessarily see the same type of program being picked up in other states, and I just encourage folks to look at it. You know, that middle housing option is so difficult for our families. During this time, we also thought a lot about how hard it is to put your life back together. You don't have a driver's license. You don't have your birth certificate. You don't have all those things that so many of us take for granted or keep in a lockbox and can be so difficult to get because they come from all different parts of state government, of federal government, and of different agencies. So what we created was a one-stop shop that FEMA, thankfully, eventually worked with us on. You know, that same center that people would come in seeking their FEMA help would also have our driver's licensing group, would also have our vital statistics group. As we thought through everything, food assistance and others that people might need, our goal was to have it in one room. Then we thought about how and why people were getting denied for FEMA. And what did they need there, because they don't have that documentation, and how we could get that in that room too, because if they were told they didn't have something, they shouldn't have to go back home or make a phone call. The idea would be they could walk across that room and talk to someone else in it. We called those disaster resource centers as a one-stop shop in hard-hit communities. The other thing we were able to do was set up an emergency relief fund. We took that from Massachusetts, that after the marathon bombing had set up a one fund. The idea that if there is one major fund, that you can direct it more efficiently, and it could resist the temptation to spend the vast majority of the money immediately during that emergency response, when so many of people's expenses are going to come in that intermediate housing or in that rebuilding stage. I'll tell you, donations after the tornadoes poured in from everywhere. If you ever lose faith in humanity, just look at how people respond after one of these natural disasters. They don't care about your background. They don't care how you vote. All the divisions fade away. They just want to help you. And we saw that, the generosity of the American people, especially after that 2021 tornadoes. It was in December. And I remember I'd just gotten home from a trip. My wife was torn up like I was. She took the dog out for a walk, and then she called me. And I thought, you've been gone for 5 minutes. And she said, I think we have to have a toy drive. And I said, oh, that's right. These kids lost their Christmas toys. And she said, no, Andy, they lost all their toys. What happened after that was, I think, the largest toy drive we've seen in human history. We would see tractor trailers pull up to our shelters filled with toys that we had no idea were coming. We had so many donations from Walmart, from others in this room, that we had to contract 3 warehouses to put them in. We had so much that we had Christmas in July in the same areas. I saw Santa Claus in shorts. That was not a pretty sight. But that's when you harness the amazing goodness of people, and when you're willing to open yourself up to that generosity and share the pain of what your people are going through, it's amazing what people will do. Neighbors opening their hearts, their homes, and their wallets to help each other out. That takes me to long-term recovery. We think about all those helpers that are there right after a disaster. It's been so many times that I've seen people standing in front of what used to be their home or their business, and they always ask the same question: where do I start? Seems impossible. But they're always surrounded by about 12 people that say, why don't you start with us? And a lot of groups come in and they help at that phase. But what we've really got to be looking for are, who are those partners that are going to be there a year later or 2 years later? One of those partners is with us today. He's Pastor Stephen Boykin, who's sitting here on the third row. In December of 2021, Pastor Boykin founded the Hope Initiative. His town of Mayfield had just been destroyed by an F4 tornado, and he saw a need for housing across Western Kentucky, and he got to work immediately. To date, they have built 60 homes across the region with support of the dollars just from our emergency relief fund and so many more. And it's home after home after home. What Pastor Boykin has taught me is the last person who gets a set of keys is just as important as the first. That the work has to continue with all the urgency, even when you see a town being rebuilt and rising from the ashes, because that last person has gone through more trauma than anyone else. And our goal has to be to get to them. Last December, I joined Pastor Boykin to hand over keys to the 57th, 58th, 59th, and 60th homes built by his organization in Kentucky. As a gift, he gave me a Bible page framed with wood found in the debris near the old Mayfield City Hall destroyed in the tornado. The page was from the book of Isaiah, chapters 58 and 59, mirroring the number of houses that we had built together. Highlighted were the lines, "Feed the hungry and help those in trouble." And another one fitting the occasion, "You will be known as a rebuilder of walls and a restorer of homes." Let's thank everybody like Pastor Boykin that You know, I get asked, and it's never in things like this, what's your favorite part of being governor? Because you would never respond in emergency disaster. But when you hand over keys to a family that has been, homeless, even if they've had a place to stay, they've been homeless for a year or for 2 years, and you see kids running through it, picking out their rooms, you see God in that moment. And again, you see trauma just shed off of people so quickly. I've had a grandfather raising his grandkids saying the place we put him in was the nicest place he'd ever lived. And you know what? After all the trauma he'd been through, doesn't he deserve that triumph? And I've just seen moms and dads breaking down knowing that there is now a solid foundation that they can continue to raise their kids on. Faith has helped guide us in Kentucky. We've proved a little goes a long way, especially with the progress we've made in the East and in the West. In Eastern Kentucky, we've now embarked on what I think is one of the most ambitious rebuilding programs in our country's history. See, our challenge is that people settled in the hollers, right? Those are the valleys that flood instead of on top of our mountains. And so we are moving over 500 families over time up on top of former coal mines, building affordable homes with solar panels on the top of them to make sure they are affordable to live in. The average utility bill in these homes will be about $50 a month. And so if you just take a minute, I am a Democratic governor in Kentucky, building affordable housing on top of coal mines with solar panels on them. A lot is possible in this world when we just work for what's right and treat every family like their own. But it's actually a solution, not just to a housing crisis that existed before, but ensuring we could move people out of harm's way. We started out drawing this on a napkin with a number of county judges because we knew people couldn't just rebuild in the same place because they barely survived when their home was swept away. How could we put them there again? I stood on what used to be a home in Knott County where 4 kids were swept away. They were the 4 kids we lost in 2022. How could we put other kids on that same location? Let me tell you, whether it's Skyview or Chestnut Ridge, 2 that are ahead, when you see a school bus pull up in a new neighborhood that you have built in a place that will never flood, it changes your life. Amazing to see what can be done. And by the way, we call these affordable homes with $1 million views. You ought to see the mountains all around them. It's going to be an incredible place for people to live. In Western Kentucky, we tried to get innovative too, because as we look at a housing crisis, we've got a lot of good programs that already exist. Right? People are always trying to invent a new program that they think will be the solution. We had an affordable housing trust fund that leverages about $8.5, $9 in private money for every public dollar. that we get. So we were able to put some of our HUD-DR funds through it, and we were able to fund $223 million of new affordable rental units in Western Kentucky, 953. It's the biggest housing announcement that we've ever had in that region of the state. That's that idea that when people go through the worst, we ought to be thinking how we respond with the best. It's fitting that Walmart is today's partner, because for someone who's lost everything, who is finally trying to get back on their feet, they can find just about everything they need in their Walmart. And so let me mention just two things about Walmart that have stuck with me, other than the former CEO coming to Perry County, coming to Hazard. Right after that, I mean, as people were digging out, walking around talking to all the employees. I was there that day, and somehow about 15 people I knew were in the Walmart. And so he thought I knew everyone in Kentucky. But when the worst was going on in the flooding, we had a regional airport right outside of Hazard. And that's where our National Guard was flying, was dropping the hoist, was pulling people up hundreds of feet and then bringing them to safety. And then we had the folks that worked at the airport that were pulling them off and bringing them into a really small terminal. And you know what? The manager of that Walmart had gone and gotten everything that he thought people would need, from the snacks to any type of medical assistance they might need, to some clothing, and had brought it to that terminal. And there were Walmart employees that were there, helping as people had come off to try to make sure they were okay. The second piece is on the other end. In our travel trailers and in some of our homes, Walmart and some other partners have made those greeting baskets. All right, because remember, when you've lost everything and you walk into a new home, you don't have anything you need. You might have the appliance, but you don't even have utensils. You don't have what you need to clean that new home or travel trailer that you're in. And let me say, when you see that Walmart basket or that other, again, it just takes that one extra thing off of you. It gives that family one more bit of joy. So remember, those small things are really important. In closing, in Kentucky, every time we come together to reflect on what's happened, I always try to remind our people, while it's almost impossible to understand the why these things especially keep happening in Kentucky, we always see God in the response. You see God in the helpers, and there are always helpers in Kentucky and across the country. Today, Kentucky stands together, a picture of strength, resilience, and hope for our fellow Americans. While we've been through the worst of the worst, we have currently built the best economy of our lifetime, having the very best years for economic development and announcing the highest starting wage in our history last year. We've broken our export records, our tourist records. We're a state that some people used to look down on, and now a lot of people are looking up too. I'm proud of our story, but I'm mainly really proud of our people. And I'm honored to speak with each of you today. When you are prepared for a disaster, you can respond quickly. When you really care, you spend your time thinking about every single challenge our families will face, and it makes us better at our jobs. And if I could leave you with just one thought, we think a lot about the mechanics of, say, debris removal, right? The mechanics of what some of the rebuilding will take. I think a real disaster response as we evolve ought to start thinking about that family standing in front of what used to be their home when nothing is left. How do they restart their lives? What do they need in the week, and then the next month, and then in the next several years? And if we can get our collective disaster responses there, we'll serve the American people in a really incredible way. Thank you all for having me. Thank you. If I did not go over my time limit, I think Gerard is going to interrogate me, so this should be fun.
Well, first off, I'm going to thank you, everybody. Another round of applause for the governor. That was amazing. I get asked often about, from my kids, from my wife, from people I work with who aren't in politics, how I can work in politics. And I point to people like Governor Beshear and others that I've had the pleasure of working with, leading through challenges, leading through disasters, but also showing up every day for your constituents, for your family, for your friends, for your neighbors. That's what we do at Walmart. So I'll pose the first question to you, then we'll throw it out to the group. But pretty august group of folks here in the room, business leaders, private sector, non-government entities. What advice would you have for us as we think about preparing for the next disaster that you could take from your 8 years in office and prior to that you might wish, man, if we had only done this, or if there are these things that come to mind, just
So my goal in every disaster we've been through is to do a full review. And by the way, we've got Eric Gibson, who heads my Kentucky Emergency Management here. Eric, thank you for what you do. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk about, I look at Eric and I say, okay, now you have to do this. But we try to learn something from everyone. All right, we can't be afraid to ask the questions. I actually said this after I saw some pushback recently from some of our federal leaders, I think after the flooding in Texas, which was, I thought we'd gotten hit by the worst flood you could imagine. They got hit really hard too. After every one, we ought to ask, what else could we have done? After every single one, we ought to ask, what additional step can we take next time? We didn't have the number of search and rescue teams that we do now to go to home when the tornadoes hit us in 2021, and we knew we needed to. We didn't have the number of swift water rescue teams that we have now before the floods of 2022. We didn't have the number of helicopters that have the hoist capacity that we have now with our National Guard and our state police before that 2022 flood. So I think in each and every one, it's what's the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And we got to a point with Pastor Boykin where they were getting really good at building the houses. They were coming out fast. But we were watching people go into houses with nothing in it, which we talked about before. And that was reaching out to that next partner and the next one. And I will say our private sector has shown incredible generosity in it. But I'd also say be creative. Think about if one of your employees was in this situation, all of the different things and services they would need and how you can contribute. Because I will tell you, you will never make a governor more happy than if you come and say, I've got an idea about how we can improve natural disasters and we'll help you with it. It's whether it's that care basket, whether it is designing a program where your employees can spend some volunteer time after a natural disaster, but still receive some compensation in helping those that have been harmed. We've seen that in a number of places. But then also, don't underestimate the power of your philanthropy, going to the right nonprofit or the right government group. I would look at it really closely. If I have a concern about disaster response right now, it's that it appears that we are now seeing intense competition amongst a number of nonprofits, all of which that do good work. But if the money goes 100 different ways and we don't have great coordination between them, then are we going to get the best response that's out there? And so to all of those groups, I'd just say, work with us. If we can be that depository where that coordination occurs and or set up the councils between each other. We've even seen after some disasters a lot of advertising to try to steer some of those contributions. And again, that is not to downplay any of our nonprofits who do phenomenal, incredible, and necessary work, but let's just make sure we're not duplicating the things that others are doing, and that instead every dollar that comes in we're adding to.
That's great. We have one question from the audience if someone wants to hop up. I know, anyone? Someone run up there. If not, oh, come on down. You got one? Before we do that, let me just take one moment, point of personal privilege. Senator Mark Pryor tried to sneak in here without any acknowledgments. We want to thank him for his years of service to the natural state and the many things he did for us, representing us in Congress. So thank you, Senator Pryor.
It's on? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Governor Beshear, for being here. My name's Maria Baez-Hicks. I'm a member of our Accessibility Center of Excellence. And I define my job as saying any human interaction that Walmart engages in, I am one of the people who tries to make sure that it's always accessible. And so as I think about disaster response, oftentimes disabled people are forgotten.
Yeah.
And so I guess the question and the challenge is, what are you doing to be intentional about including people with disabilities in the response and in the short and long-term responses?
Incredibly important, because we want everyone to make it through the natural disaster, and we want to make sure our services are there for that stabilization phase, for that long-term recovery phase. So I think about some of the preparation pieces. During the pandemic, it was right after my first major press conference that a woman named Virginia Moore, who headed our deaf and hard of hearing state organization, called me and said, "You need an ASL interpreter." And I said, "You're right." She was there the next day. She and the two Rachels stood by my side for a year and a half. She made it all the way through that pandemic, and then we lost Virginia to cancer. And Virginia had become, at this point, just a state treasure. Kids were learning ASL sign language. I mean, had become someone that people trusted and just exuded goodness. She's the only ASL interpreter I know that has had us not one but two bobbleheads created for her, because she didn't like the sign in the first bobblehead and made them do another one. That was the power of Virginia Moore. We have a grant program called the More Safer Nights, named after her, for the deaf and hard of hearing that have an arm that wake you up, connected to that weather radio. So thinking about that piece. Also working with first responders in communities so they know where some of our individuals, especially with physical disabilities, are if they need assistance. Working with them so that they know where, especially if there are homes or other options for adults or children with disabilities that are in a more institutional setting, that we know the services that they might need and that we're drilled and prepared for that. On especially the travel trailer and the long-term housing, we know that they have to be accessible. And we work that into each and every one of our plans, whether that's wheelchair ramps or others. Pastor Boykin has specifically done that with a number of their homes, and they plan out when they know where these families are and how to help them. It is really important on the housing end. We're doing this in Eastern Kentucky to have one intake group. For us, it's FAHI there, so that you actually know how many families are in the queue and what their needs are as you're planning on that building. But I think you said it. It's all about being intentional and taking those steps and learning as you go to do more and better the next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Great question, and thank you, Governor Beshear, for your time this morning.
All right.
We're gonna move along in the program. I'm getting the hook. We could talk forever, but
Thank you all for what you do. Stephen, good to see you.
Thank you very much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Showing up for our communities is huge. It's who we are, and honestly, it's who we are on a day-to-day basis. Walmart's support of communities and disasters goes back several decades, actually, if you listen to some of our leaders, back to the founding of the company, because it's just who we are. This is where our associates live, and this is where our customers live. And every single day they come in and they support us and are part of our community. And so it's incredibly important for us to make sure that we are giving back to that community to make sure we're taking care of them appropriately.
We've been partnering with Matthew 25 Ministries now formally for 3 years. It really started with a relationship with P&G and their Tide Loads of Coke trailer. After Hurricane Ida, we had a shared mission and that we wanted to get close to where the community need was, and we had the physical space that we could offer, and just saw the need grow tremendously through that. And so what better way to serve the community than with a partnership with a nonprofit like Matthew 25 Ministries.
We'll deploy depending upon the need. Sometimes different disasters need different things. But oftentimes that comes with food, but then also other types of assets like our laundry trailers and partners that do that. or restroom facilities and shower facilities, so that we make sure that people that may have lost their homes or may not have access do have access to some of those basics that sometimes even a disaster situation make it feel a little bit more normal and bring some of that normalcy back to them.
Regardless of the scale of the disaster, we're here to support them.
Disasters tend to bring out the very, very best in people, and so there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm around how we support communities, how we show up, how we care for. So this is just one of those that the mission is incredible when we talk about being able to help those in that moment of need.
Welcome to the stage, Jeff Byard from Team Rubicon, Beth Davison from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and Glenda Fleming-Willis from Walmart, in conversation with Persia Payne-Hurley from North Carolina Emergency Management.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Whew, well, I'm fired up now after all of that. What do you think? Yeah? Well, my name is Persia Payne-Hurley. Some of you might know me. I want to first give a shout out to all of our private partners that have stuck with North Carolina and the North Carolina BEOC through countless disasters, in particular Hurricane Helene. Not only the response, but the ongoing recovery. Y'all have stuck with us for these 11 years. And I especially want to bring to the fore all that Walmart has done with us. When we come up with something unusual, and I'm known for coming up with something unusual in the response, that is going to speed up recovery, speed up the need to support our communities, and speed up first responders to those needs. Walmart is the first folks to think about, who can I test this out with live? And I think you're going to hear more about that today. So because we are going to be make a little bit of an adjustment to our schedule, I want y'all to help me embrace our wonderful panel, because we're going to go faster, but we're going to hit some really great highlights. So please welcome Beth Davison, Senior Vice President of the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, Glenda Fleming-Willis, Senior Vice President of Operations, North Division of Walmart Stores. She's a hero, I heard. And Jeff Byard, Chief Programs Officer of Team Rubicon. So embrace them with me. All right. For a panel, and I'm going to give you guys a chance to hit them in what we'll call the lightning round, if you want to hit something in particular. But for the first question to all of our panel, and we're gonna start with you, Beth, is, and I'm gonna try to paraphrase this. In this pivotal moment for private-public partnerships, and in particular the pressure on state and local to take more of the responsibility to respond to disasters and to help their citizens, where, from your point of view, are the most critical gaps?
Thank you, Persia. And thank you so much to the Walmart Foundation and the U.S. Chamber Foundation for having us here today. It's kind of intimidating to follow our governor. And also, I'm a little triggered because we just went through 6.5 years of history of how intense it has been in Kentucky and how much we've had to overcome. And what I really appreciate about what the governor shared is all of that so much of that first response, and he really broke out those 3 critical stages. And so the information I think we have the most experience with at the business community in Kentucky is in that mid to long range planning. So the comments and the points I'll bring today, please know they're with care, that we're not on the front lines. We're not in that first disaster, that first responder type recovery. But when we think about the longer term planning, I think one of the gaps, Persia, is it's a team sport. And I think we need more people on the team. When it comes to businesses and resiliency, there's so much more that we can do, and what we found in Kentucky, than just give and just donate. Companies have this amazing ability to be infrastructure. And in Kentucky, we are the logistical hub of the world. We've got one of the biggest Amazon plants, one of the biggest UPS hubs, DHL, you name it. We understand building of infrastructure and logistics. And one of the things that shocked me when we got to work through the last 6.5 years, as the governor so nicely displayed, was just how much more we could do than just give, and how much more open the communities were for us to do that. So that's one gap that I think of. I think we're more than just funders, and I've got some good explanations of that Kentucky example. I also think that so much of the gap that we see is a lot of the disaster response is based on who we know. And but there's often little system that goes into that. So it's who you know, there's trust built in, which is good. We know trust is infrastructure. But there also has to be systems in place on how you respond. So for me, kind of coming into this, when we looked at this lightning in a bottle that you see when tragedy first strikes, you get this energy from people that they're ready to go in, they're ready to move, they're ready to give. And how much that can almost overwhelm a community that has just been completely hit by disaster. But at the same time, I think about well, what could you do with that energy if it was a little bit more better prepared to put out and to harness that energy and to plan it and prepare it in the right direction, in the right ways. And we, just that ability, that first response to keep that energy happening. But yeah, so I've got good Kentucky examples we'll talk about later, but those are some challenges.
And Glenda, I'm going to come to you next, but I want to just comment quickly that what Beth just said. Now she's got me pumped up. That I think all the chamber members that are here, everybody that's a member of a chamber, can you raise your hands for me? I'm talking to you. I'm challenging you to be a belly button, as I've made the North Carolina chambers belly buttons, to the coordination piece. We heard Mike say earlier the coordination is a big missing piece. So I'm going to inject those little challenges as we go. But Glenda, same question to you, critical gaps and your take on those.
Yeah, I think you set this up so well because for here at Walmart, we actually talked about this earlier because I would say the same thing as far as one of our critical gaps is being able to embed, whether it be a nonprofit, whether it be a retailer or any other organization, is embedding yourself into the planning process ahead of time is so critically important. And I'll speak specifically about Walmart, and I kind of skipped over this. I've been with Walmart for 31 years. I tell people I started out when I was 12. But I've been with Walmart for 31 years, and unfortunately, I have seen and experienced many of the disasters that the governor spoke about, as well as additional. I helped support Hurricane Katrina afterwards in Kentucky. I'm actually a Kentuckian as well. Born and bred in Kentucky. I bleed blue, UK blue, and Walmart. Sorry, my U of L fans.
We just become best friends.
Oh, we did. We did. But I will say, the beautiful thing about Walmart that a lot of people don't realize is that we have a store located within 90% of our population here in the country, within 10 miles. And so when disaster strikes, we actually become a hub for our communities because we're not just considered a retail outlet. We are considered a neighborhood lifeline at that point. And you saw on the video, that was one of our parking lots after one of the disasters. And a lot of people don't realize the strength and the capability that we have that we can help support a community, whether that be mobile showers or mobile pharmacies or the water donations or charging stations. We set up all of these resources within the parking lots. But at that point, we're utilizing our associates to be able to learn and understand where our vulnerabilities are so that we can make sure that we are reaching out into the community in the right places and the right way. But I would say, right now, I do believe that there is a gap. I think that there is a gap from a perspective on the front side, is understanding and knowing what resources are available. And it's not just about Walmart. It's about many other retailers and nonprofit organizations out there that have these capabilities. And if you bring those individuals in on the front side in this planning process that you're speaking about, it transforms the way that we can react, because we all know that after a disaster, you may have minutes or hours to be able to respond to the community, to be able to save lives. And I just want to just real quickly add an example to that. And you heard the governor speak about Eastern Kentucky and the flooding. And the store manager that he was referring to is amazing, by the way. His name is JD. We were there with him. And not only did they provide gift baskets, but what we learned very quickly was after a storm such as that, so people need things such as tetanus shots and hepatitis shots. And we didn't have enough in the community because so many people needed them. But Walmart could source thousands of tetanus shots and hepatitis shots, and we did that. And we went all across the nation finding these shots to be able to provide. But not only did we provide them, but we set up 4 locations across Eastern Kentucky with our pharmacists to actually be able to administer those shots to the community that needed them. And there's all of those stories, Persia, behind the scenes. Like, we actually got on 4-wheelers. Our pharmacists got on 4-wheelers and drove out into those hollers that he talked about to administer the shots where they needed them. But that's the power of a relationship and knowing what kind of resources that are available to be able to leverage, because in the end, we all have one goal, and that's to make sure that we're out there saving lives. And regardless of what name is on the front of the building or what color state you are, like, that's what's important. Everybody comes together and knows how to react, take care of our communities.
Oh, Glenda, thank you. And I do have to make one comment. Y'all saw the film where Walmart had the portable showers. And as a former soldier, I can tell you that's gold, and not just a disaster, any kind of war zone, which some of our disasters are. So I want to thank you for that, and the ingenuity that we see between private and public, as you guys as an example.
Yeah, Persia and I were talking about this, but that was a COE for us. We learned actually from Hurricane Katrina, because when Hurricane Katrina hit, we knew that was a need for the community. We had a dark store there, and we call it dark store at Walmart, Gerard. It's an empty store that wasn't being utilized, and we converted that store into putting showers in there, and we put mobile showers inside that facility. But then we learned from that and said, how quickly can we be able to utilize to be able to be mobile? And that's how our mobile units actually ended up coming to fruition. And so now we can actually transport those all across the country wherever they're needed.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. I'm going to go to Jeff. You guys, Jeff is representing here on this panel big in the nonprofit sphere and how they connect into private sector, business, the business community. And the same question to you, Jeff, critical gaps.
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. It's a great day to be a gray shirt. And you'll hear me say that, and we have the best business attire, I think, that of anybody. So a couple of things, as our panelists have said. So, I'll put it to you this way. So many times in government, the private sector, I don't like the term nonprofit. I believe the nonprofit's a for-impact industry. So I use the term for impact. But I believe, yes, that's what we do. Too many times we're treated like a generator. We're only turned on when the lights are off. So we have to be formally written into plans. We have to be there, as we've said, as the panel said, before the wind blows. So, formal, write us into plans. Let us be part of the execution. We bring tons of capability to the table, especially at our local level. I don't know, is there any local emergency manager represented in the audience? Thank you for what you do. You have a thankless job, and I really appreciate what you do, and the people appreciate what you do. All across our country, there are tons of gaps. What I've seen most of all, what companies like Walmart and others can bring to bear is logistics and planning. That's real operational capability that closes gaps, not just during the response, but days after it. Headlines last 14 days. Recovery can last 14 years. These companies, our four impact organizations are in the communities. We're all local. So, tap us into those plans. Put us in the game early because we can deliver.
Awesome stuff. And as mentioned earlier, we have a little less time than we had originally planned for. So I want to jump to a question that's going to get us all hot and bothered, gets me hot and bothered. I'm going to start back over with Beth. And Beth, I want you to talk about, because of the different ways that we intend to shape private-public relationships in this conference to actually add to the collection of all that we want to gather to build this roadmap. I want you to talk about priorities, a capability that we should help build.
And I think in some of our examples that we found in Kentucky, first off, before the tornado hit, or the time, right within hours of that tornado hitting, the U.S. Chamber Foundation, Mike Carney and his team reached out to us and was like, y'all got to get ready. They're going to want to give. Do you have a C3? We're like, we have a C3, but there's so many funds set up across the state. They were like, get ready. Then these tornadoes hit. They killed 80 people, and as a Kentuckian, it was awful to watch. And within 24 hours, the U.S. Chamber Foundation team had us on a Zoom call with the Joplin, Missouri Chamber to understand, okay, well, you're a chamber. How did you help in this space? And understanding the dynamic convening natures of chambers, I think, is important in this context. We, bipartisan, don't get voted in and out of office. By nature, we're supposed to be dealing with the issues of the day to help solve them. So we just spent 18 months in Kentucky working with a bipartisan group on childcare, trying to solve for that. Very different than disaster resiliency, but when we stepped in for this, what we could tell was, we were like, okay, no, they were right. Kentucky Sports Radio, Big Blue Nation, wanted to do a fundraiser for us. We're like, okay, yeah, they were right. U.S. Chamber Foundation, we've got to raise the money. We did. We did a really good job all over the world. We raised funds from those Kentucky Sports Network. But then we had the money, and I was like, okay, Western Kentucky to trusted leaders, like, we have these funds. Are you ready? What do you all need? Because we were learning too, as a grantor, how careful you have to be with that funding and to make sure it gets to the right place. And Western Kentucky are like, Beth, we don't know. We are still just in the midst of a very big crisis here. And the needs understanding was very different across the board. And so we were all of a sudden finding ourselves, and we weren't just going to be donating checks. We then had to figure out, how do you convene a group of the region and understand their priority of needs? In true Kentucky fashion, we got a large automobile manufacturer. In our case, for this was Toyota, that came in, and they do disaster resilience. They apply Six Sigma, Lean, Kaizen practices from Japan in how they look at disaster recovery. They came in, helped us lead and facilitate a group. We did an open call for Western Kentucky leaders to come in. We had over 100 people that are in the middle of this disaster come to have their voice heard and be like, this is what we need. No, this is what we need. That was interesting. We put all the funders from the private sector in that room so that we could coordinate the response. They could hear directly from leaders, but then we could go to a room and be like, what are you going to fund? What are you going to fund? And also, those Western Kentucky leaders were able to say to those funders, we need this money, but it's way too hard to get. Your application process is hard. Help us make this easier and put less stress on these individuals that are serving on those front lines. And so that, for us, was another interesting lesson. When you think about infrastructure, needs assessments, how you capitalize on this lightning in a bottle of these first giving wave, whether that's energy. I remember thinking, and our governor talked about continuous improvement when it comes to the emergency response, but I think there's a continuous improvement when it comes to the mid and long-term range planning. If I could go back in Kentucky in the way that Kentuckians, if anything, Kentucky loves Kentucky. And I bet you all feel the same way about your own states. We really love our state. I would have loved to have been able to direct that energy in the way that we needed from the jump. So, like, okay, you can give money today, but do you know in 6 months you can come and help do some mid-range housing or long-term housing? So I just think in terms of infrastructure, businesses, our practices, they can go so much further than just that dollar and getting us in. And then the other thing is too, is that the communities are different. What we did in Western Kentucky was not the same in Eastern Kentucky. They unfortunately have a long history of disaster planning. I think it brings with it a different set of opportunity, though, to go in and think about those continuous improvement opportunities.
Yes, Glenda's hot. Go,
Oh,
Glenda.
no. I'm like, oh.
That is awesome because I think that, so I heard the chamber as a convener and a coordinating body, kind of supporting speed. You guys greased the skids, so.
We had no skin in the game, too. I think that, and I'll make it quick, but we took no money, no administrative fees, 100% of any dollar that came into us went back out, and it was just temporary. We didn't have any gain. There was no financials coming into us. It was just to get our communities back up and running.
Awesome. And Glenda?
Yeah, I want to tack on to what was just said, because I agree 100%. If a chamber could be a convener, like that would be phenomenal for us. But in reference to what you're talking about with funding, again, this goes back to understanding and knowing what your partners can do to help support the community. So for example, for us, we have a Walmart Foundation here, and I don't know that a lot of communities even understand or know what that means. But our Walmart Foundation has donated, last year we donated over $2 billion globally to help support communities.
Wonderful.
Yes, and I had mentioned earlier about our associates, because our associates, they're the moms, they're the dads, they're the local Little League coaches. They know what's needed in a community. Our associates donated 300,000 hours of volunteer time last year in their communities. So, there are resources there that can be leveraged in these circumstances and situations right here at Walmart or even at other retailers. And they do similar things. I don't want to just sit up here and tout what we do here at Walmart, because there are other retailers that do the same. It's just about getting to know what those offerings are and be able to leverage those when you're in time of need.
Thank you, Glenda. And I got to give the same question to Jeff.
I'm a 1900s Marine, so sometimes I don't hear well. So is it more the call to action, right? What are we going to do different? I'll tell you a couple of things. In just general terms, a disaster survivor, she or he, family may need 100 things. Team Rubicon may bring 5 of those things. So we've got to bring partners with us. Take a look at your organization. What can you uniquely do that others can't? And then where can you find that partnership that complements the disaster survivor? And I'll give you a quick example. And I want to thank Walmart. We have, money is money, right? Everything we do at Team Rubicon, it does take $1. We cannot do the wonderful work that we do without our corporate partners and our individuals that give so much to what we do. So thank you for that. But from a partnership standpoint, I'll give you an example that's real world. We have an emerging agreement with the American Red Cross. They do sheltering, right? They do sheltering across the country. We do expedited home repair. We're now sharing that data real time so that we can get families out of cots and back into their homes faster. It's where do we complement each other? So, my call to action to this team is take your logos off, take your egos, leave them at the door. What can you do to make a disaster survivor's life better? As I look around this, and I used to be in the government emergency management world, I never had this capability in front of me. There's nothing we couldn't do with just the people and the organizations in this room. So, do that 1% more. What can you do 1% each day that betters your organization that can support a disaster survivor? And I don't know if that answers the question, but that's my call to action, Burgess.
No, I think Jeff gave it to us, right? That call to action. I'm going to add to it by saying, y'all, that there are 3 things that I always think of because I have to mention them, especially from the private side in working with government, and that is limitations, capabilities, and expectations. If we are willing to, keyword, share, if we're willing to share, if I talk to Lee Seiler, I think he's here, my Walmart point of contact, and contact for most states in the nation now for Walmart. And I said, Lee, what are your expectations of what's coming next? When will you be back up and running on this store or that store? How long will you be able to continue to support this community in that disaster before something, say, has a problem, like roads or weather? That information to government kind of gives me a green light to then go to my leadership and say, sir, if we can do this, then Walmart stores can open. If we can do that, then those associates can get there and help this community. And that means government isn't helping the community. It means that the economy is remaining as close to the same as possible, and getting back after a disaster to normal is what everybody wants. So I'm going to make that comment. And in the 1 minute we have left, I want to give the panelists a chance to give us one thing to remember going forward as we build. And remember, mine was expectations, challenges, capabilities, expectations. And I'm going to go there. And if we have anything left, we'll give y'all a chance to ask a question. So let's start with Jeff.
Real quick, one team, one fight, team. That's what it's all about. Don't fight each other. Let's fight the disaster, and let's make a disaster survivor's life better. One team, one fight.
I love that. As I was thinking through my head as you were talking through that, it's cutting through the red tape. You know, in times of disaster, it shouldn't be about that. It should be about us all like working together as a common goal. You know, Walmart wants to be there on the good days, but you know what? We want to be there on the hard days also. So as quickly as we can be able to work through to be able to get to the community to help save lives, that's what our priority is.
I think applying the lessons of continuous improvement and supply chain logistics to infrastructure rebuilding needs assessments. What if we had needs assessment to understand what Western Kentucky was ready for versus Eastern Kentucky? I think the same thing with coalition building and making sure we're not all duplicating services and bringing our specialty to the table and allowing others to flourish, especially in these days of very run-leaning C3s and nonprofit dollars shrinking.
So you guys, as we're wrapping up here, going forward later today, as we bring all of this wonderful experience to the fore, don't forget to meet everybody here. Meet everybody here while the sun is shining. Because I want to be able to sit in my bunker in North Carolina and think, who do I know? So please do that. You promise? And that's it for this panel. Please, let's give them a hand.
You know, as we get ready to transition here, I have a ton of Persia stories. I can tell you right now, it's really interesting because when it comes down to who do you know, which we say, but we said this earlier to each other, it's who do you trust, right? It's about who do you know that's going to go get things done. And as we have had plenty of conversations, and she referred to it up top, so I feel I'm at full liberty to say what I'm about to say, which is, we come up sometimes with some crazy solutions when we're working together. When we come with unique challenges that are those variables that happen in disaster, and you all know what I'm talking about, sometimes it throws you a curveball. And you need people that you can trust, and that you need people that you can call and that you can rely on to get things done. And sometimes come up with crazy solutions that are going to serve that community in the way that it needs to be served in the moment. So Persia, thank you so much for everything that you do. Can we give her a hand, please? I hope that you've been enjoying so far some of the comments and the speakers that we've had, some great information that's being shared. But I got to tell you, this is just the warm-up act, right? What's about to happen next is really when we get into why you actually came here. We didn't want another conversation, and I can tell you for me, we've had these conversations for 2 decades plus. We go and we talk, and I think the governor even called it out, and Gerard called it out. Sometimes we go and we write reports. And we talk about it, and then we move to the next conversation. We see each other in a year, and we say, hey, it's great to see you, and we have another report, and we have another conversation. But the key is, how do we actually move the needle? How do we move forward? How do we actually do things that are going to create legacy for our communities that allow them to recover faster? How do we teach the next generation to create resilient communities on the front end so that we recover faster, and that disaster that occurred doesn't define us as a community, but it becomes a past fact? it's important that we use this time that we have available to make sure that we are driving forward. So what you do next as we go into this afternoon is going to be really important. It's how you focus, it's how you engage, it's the solutions that you come up with, it's the conversations that you had, and even as Persia said, yes, it's who you meet, who you develop relationships, and we hope you take that away with you as well. So I have one thing with my team as we talk, and some of my team is here, and they'll know what I'm about to say, which is we have regular messages that go out, but I always sign it at the bottom with that kind of that closing statement, and the word is adelante. And I know some of you in this room definitely know what that means, and it means forward, and it's how we move forward as a community. And when I say community, I don't mean just the community itself, but all the pieces that make up the community, which is everybody sitting in this room. So for our nonprofits, or now our new word, for impact groups, for our volunteer organizations, for our government leaders that are here at all levels, for our private sector partners, for our educational institutions, and for our religious organizations. I mean, it's working together to make sure that we're coming up with the solutions that are going to lead us into the future and forward. Adelante. With that, I get the pleasure of transitioning you now to the next steps. And so here's what we're going to do. We are going to leave this room, for those of you that are remaining and going into the next sessions. We're going to take a very, very short break and allow you to refresh your coffee, maybe stop by the facilities if you need, but quickly move into Ballroom A, which is across the hallway. And we're going to have another conversation. And then as we move into this afternoon, after lunch, we get into those sessions where we really want you to dig in and dig deep and come up with those solutions. So I hope you've had a great time so far this morning. We're going to go ahead and adjourn you out to the other. Thank you for your time and attention. Adelante.